The absolute audacity of what just went down backstage at Monday Night Raw will have you questioning everything you thought you knew about WWE's current landscape. What started as a simple locker room conversation between two of the most dominant forces in professional wrestling turned into the most brutal and shocking beatdown we've witnessed in years, and the reason behind it. It's going to absolutely blow your mind. Bronson Reed, the big bad bougie himself, made what might be the biggest mistake of his entire wrestling career when he decided to run his mouth about Brock Lesnar's recent absence from WWE programming. But this wasn't just your typical backstage trash talk. Oh no, Reed crossed a line that should never be crossed, and what happened next was pure, unadulterated carnage that left everyone in the building absolutely stunned. Picture this: Bronson Reed, riding high on his recent momentum after his incredible matches with Seth Rollins and his dominant performances in recent weeks, felt like he was untouchable. The 330-pound Australian powerhouse had been making waves, calling out legends, and positioning himself as the new monster of Monday Night Raw. His confidence was through the roof, and honestly, who could blame him? The man had been putting on clinic after clinic, proving that size, power, and athleticism could coexist in ways that few superstars have ever demonstrated. But here's where things get absolutely insane. During what should have been a routine interview segment with WWE officials backstage, Reed decided to take shots at Brock Lesnar's part-time schedule. Now, we've all heard wrestlers complain about part-timers before, but Reed took it to a completely different level. He didn't just question Lesnar's commitment, he went after something far more personal and sacred to the beast incarnate. Reed, in his infinite wisdom, decided to mock Lesnar's farming lifestyle in Saskatchewan. But that wasn't the crossing of the line. Reed made disparaging comments about Lesnar's family, specifically targeting his children and suggesting that Lesnar was soft for choosing family time over constant wrestling appearances. The moment those words left Reed's mouth, you could feel the temperature in the room drop to absolute zero. What Reed failed to realize is that there are certain boundaries you simply do not cross when it comes to Brock Lesnar, and family is the biggest one of them all. This is a man who walked away from the biggest contract in WWE history in 2004 because he wanted to try new things and eventually start a family. This is someone who has consistently prioritized his personal life while still delivering whenever he steps through those ropes. And Reed, in his overconfident state, just declared war on everything Lesnar holds sacred. The response was immediate and devastating. Within minutes of Reed's comments making their way through the backstage area, Brock Lesnar came storming through the corridors like a man possessed. Witnesses described the look in his eyes as something they had never seen before, not even during his most intense UFC fights or his most heated WWE rivalries. This wasn't beast mode, this was something entirely more terrifying. Lesnar found Reed in the catering area, surrounded by other wrestlers who were just trying to grab a quick meal between segments. Without a single word of warning, Lesnar grabbed Reed by the back of his gear and launched him face-first into a table laden with food and drinks. The sound of the impact echoed through the entire area as plates shattered and drinks went flying everywhere. But that was just the beginning. As Reed tried to get to his feet, clearly dazed from the unexpected attack, Lesnar grabbed him by the throat with one massive hand and launched him across the room into a stack of equipment cases. The 330-pound Reed flew through the air like he weighed nothing, crashing into thousands of dollars worth of audio and lighting equipment with a sound that had everyone in the vicinity immediately backing away. What happened next was a masterclass in pure, unbridled fury. Lesnar, moving with a speed and precision that made him one of the most feared competitors in both WWE and UFC, grabbed Reed again before he could even process what was happening. This time, Lesnar hoisted the big man up onto his shoulders and delivered a devastating F5 right onto the concrete floor of the backstage area. The impact was so intense that several wrestlers and crew members later reported feeling the floor shake beneath their feet. Reed's body hit that concrete with such force that you could hear it from several rooms away. But Lesnar wasn't done, not even close. As Reed lay motionless on the cold concrete, Lesnar stood over him and delivered a message that sent chills down everyone's spine. "You want to talk about my family? You want to question my priorities? Let me show you what happens when you cross that line." Lesnar's voice was calm, controlled, but filled with a menace that made everyone within earshot suddenly very interested in being somewhere else. Lesnar then did something that nobody saw coming. He grabbed one of the nearby equipment cases, the heavy, reinforced kind that usually requires two people to move, and lifted it above his head with ease. For a moment, everyone thought he was going to bring it down on Reed's prone form, but instead, he hurled it against the nearby wall where it exploded into pieces, creating a sound like a thunderclap that could be heard throughout the entire arena. The message was clear: this could have been Reed, but Lesnar was showing restraint. However, that restraint had very definite limits. Security finally arrived on the scene, but they approached Lesnar with the kind of caution you'd show a wild animal. These are men trained to handle the biggest and strongest wrestlers in the world, but something about Lesnar in that moment made them extremely hesitant to get too close. Smart move, considering what we witnessed next. Reed, somehow finding the strength to get back to his feet despite the brutal beating he had just endured, made perhaps the worst decision of his entire life. Instead of backing down, instead of apologizing, instead of recognizing that he had awakened something that should have been left sleeping, Reed decided to escalate the situation further. "Is that all you've got, part-timer?" Reed spat, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. "I've taken worse beatings in my sleep." The absolute silence that followed those words was deafening. Even the security personnel stopped moving. Everyone in that backstage area knew that Reed had just signed his own death warrant. Lesnar's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture that made it clear the real violence was about to begin. What followed was a systematic dismantling that looked more like a UFC fight than a backstage altercation. Lesnar moved with the calculated precision of someone who had spent years perfecting the art of hurting people. He grabbed Reed and delivered a series of knee strikes to his midsection that doubled the big man over before transitioning into a takedown that sent both men crashing through a nearby table. But this wasn't just about physical domination, this was about sending a message to the entire locker room. As Lesnar rained down controlled but devastating strikes on Reed, he was making it clear that certain lines should never be crossed, certain subjects should never be broached, and certain people should never be disrespected. The sound of the beating was unlike anything anyone in that backstage area had ever heard. It wasn't the theatrical violence of a scripted match, this was real, raw, and absolutely terrifying in its intensity. Reed's attempts to fight back were valiant but ultimately futile against someone with Lesnar's combination of size, strength, speed, and legitimate fighting experience. When WWE officials finally managed to separate the two men, the backstage area looked like a war zone. Tables were overturned, equipment was scattered everywhere, and there was actual structural damage to some of the walls and fixtures. Reed was barely conscious, blood streaming from multiple cuts on his face and head, his gear torn and dirty from being thrown around like a rag doll. But the most shocking part of this entire incident wasn't the physical destruction, it was what Lesnar said as he was being escorted away from the scene. Looking back at Reed, who was being helped to his feet by multiple personnel, Lesnar delivered a final message that has the entire wrestling world talking. "That was your warning shot. Next time you decide to run your mouth about my family, I won't show the same restraint. And there won't be enough security in this building to save you." The implications of those words are absolutely staggering. This wasn't just a backstage altercation that got out of hand, this was a declaration of war from one of the most legitimately dangerous men in professional wrestling. Lesnar was making it clear that while he might be a part-timer, while he might prioritize his family and his farming operation, he is still very much capable of destroying anyone who crosses certain lines. The aftermath of this incident has been equally shocking. WWE officials have been in damage control mode, trying to figure out how to handle a situation that clearly went beyond the boundaries of typical wrestling storylines. There are reports of lawyers being involved, insurance companies being contacted, and serious discussions about whether either man will face legitimate consequences for what transpired. From a storyline perspective, this incident has created possibilities that nobody saw coming. The idea that Brock Lesnar might have a legitimate grievance against Bronson Reed, combined with the very real physical altercation that took place, opens up storytelling opportunities that blur the lines between reality and entertainment in ways that WWE hasn't explored in years. But here's what makes this situation even more complex and fascinating: Reed's response to the beatdown has been anything but apologetic. In a statement released through his social media accounts just hours after the incident, Reed doubled down on his original comments and actually challenged Lesnar to settle their differences in the ring. Brock Lesnar might be a legitimate tough guy, but he's also a coward who attacks people when they're not expecting it. If he wants to prove he's still the beast incarnate, then let's do this properly, in the ring, with a referee, where everyone can see what happens when the old guard meets the new generation. The audacity of this statement is almost unbelievable. Here's a man who just got systematically dismantled in what can only be described as a real fight, and his response is to ask for more. Either Bronson Reed has the biggest set of stones in professional wrestling, or he has a death wish that's about to be fulfilled in spectacular fashion. The wrestling community's response to this entire situation has been absolutely electric. Social media has been exploding with reactions from current and former wrestlers, with opinions ranging from those who support Lesnar's defense of his family to those who believe he went too far in his response. The divide is creating the kind of genuine buzz that WWE hasn't generated organically in years. Mick Foley tweeted, "There are lines you don't cross in this business, and family is the biggest one." Brock's response was intense, but understandable. Meanwhile, CM Punk posted, "Violence is never the answer, but sometimes it's the only language some people understand." Reed learned a valuable lesson today. The most interesting response came from Paul Heyman, Lesnar's longtime advocate, who simply posted a photo of a beast in the wild with the caption, "Some animals should never be caged, others should never be provoked." But perhaps the most significant development in this entire saga is the reported reaction from WWE's top brass. Sources close to the situation suggest that instead of being upset about the incident, company officials are actually intrigued by the possibilities it creates. The genuine heat between Lesnar and Reed, combined with the very real physicality of their altercation, represents exactly the kind of authentic emotion that WWE has been trying to capture in their programming. There are already rumors circulating about potential match bookings, special stipulations, and even the possibility of this feud headlining a major pay-per-view event. The idea of Brock Lesnar coming out of his semi-retirement to absolutely destroy someone who disrespected his family is the kind of story that practically writes itself. From Reed's perspective, this incident might actually represent the biggest opportunity of his career. Getting into a legitimate altercation with Brock Lesnar, regardless of how it started or how it ended, has instantly elevated his profile to levels that years of regular matches might never have achieved. The question now becomes whether he can capitalize on this attention or whether he's bitten off more than he can possibly chew. The physical toll of the beating is still being assessed, but early reports suggest that Reed avoided any serious long-term injuries despite the intensity of Lesnar's assault. This is somewhat surprising given the violence of the encounter, but it might also speak to Lesnar's professional experience and his ability to inflict maximum psychological impact while avoiding the kind of damage that could end a career. However, the psychological impact of this incident might be far more significant than any physical injuries. Reed has now experienced firsthand what it's like to be on the receiving end of Lesnar's genuine fury, and that's not something that can be easily forgotten or ignored. The question becomes whether this experience will make him more cautious in his future interactions or whether it will fuel an even greater desire for revenge. The timing of this incident is also particularly interesting from a business perspective. WWE has been looking for ways to create genuine excitement and unpredictability in their programming, and this situation provides exactly that. The fact that it arose organically from real tensions rather than being scripted from the beginning gives it an authenticity that audiences can sense immediately. Looking ahead, the possibilities for where this story goes are absolutely endless. Will WWE book an official match between these two monsters? Will this incident lead to Lesnar making more regular appearances to hunt down Reed? Will Reed's challenge be accepted, or will Lesnar decide that his message has already been delivered effectively? The broader implications for WWE's locker room culture are also significant. This incident serves as a clear reminder to everyone in the company that there are still certain lines that should never be crossed, certain veterans who should never be disrespected, and certain subjects that are completely off-limits. It's a lesson that could influence backstage dynamics for years to come. For fans of legitimate intensity and real emotion in professional wrestling, this incident represents everything they've been craving. The authenticity of the confrontation, the genuine stakes involved, and the unpredictable nature of how it all unfolded create the kind of compelling narrative that scripted storylines often struggle to match. The question that everyone is asking now is simple: what happens next? Will this be a one-time incident that fades into wrestling folklore? Or is this just the beginning of something much bigger and more significant? Given the personalities involved and the intensity of what transpired, it seems highly unlikely that this story ends here. Brock Lesnar has made it clear that his family is off-limits, and he's willing to back up that position with the kind of physical violence that few people in the world are capable of delivering. Bronson Reed has made it equally clear that he's not backing down from this fight, regardless of the consequences he's already faced. The collision course has been set, the battle lines have been drawn, and the entire wrestling world is waiting to see what happens when these two forces meet again. Will it be in a sanctioned match with rules and referees? Will it be another backstage altercation with no holds barred? Or will WWE find some entirely new way to capitalize on the genuine animosity between these two incredible athletes? One thing is absolutely certain: the landscape of professional wrestling has been permanently altered by what happened in that backstage area. The reverberations from this incident will be felt for months, if not years, to come. And for everyone who witnessed it, either in person or through the countless reports and videos that have emerged, it serves as a stark reminder that professional wrestling, at its core, is still populated by some of the toughest, most dangerous individuals on the planet. The beast has been awakened, and Bronson Reed is about to learn exactly what that means.